theory of mind. And then Povinelli and Eddy came up with these studies in the 90s saying, oh, chimpanzees definitely don't have a theory of mind. Why? Because we asked them to beg for food from humans who had buckets on their head versus a human that didn't have a bucket on their head, and the chimpanzees didn't know who to beg from. Or a human who had a gag over their mouth versus a blindfold over their eyes, and the chimpanzees didn't know who to beg from. So chimpanzees don't even understand seeing, much less have understanding of beliefs in others' heads. So that's just, they said, this is just ridiculous. But then Brian Hare came along, another psychologist, and said, chimpanzees obviously know what others can see and can't see, because look, if you've got this competition where a subordinate and dominant are trying to go after food, and the subordinate knows that the dominant can't see the food, the subordinate will go get it. But if the subordinate knows that the dominant can't see the food, the subordinate will avoid it. Why? Because he'd get beaten up if the dominant saw him eat the food, right? So Brian Hare said, obviously the chimpanzee understands seeing. And then Robert Lurtz says, oh, but there are all kinds of alternative explanations for what's going on here that don't involve attribution of seeing. And then, oh, they come back and say, yes, chimpanzees understand seeing. And it goes back and forth. So it's exhausting, right? But all this time spent asking, playing this game, and yes they do, no they don't, yes they do, no they don't, with these experimental studies on captive chimpanzees. Almost all the studies have been on chimpanzees. So that question, do apes read minds? So far as we know from this stuff, we can't say anything at this point. But what we do know is that, like humans, chimpanzees and orangutans and the other great apes are good at predicting behavior, right? We all managed to get here. We all predicted what each other would do. The other great apes are really good at predicting what others are going to do, predicting that they're going to get beaten up if they eat the food and the subordinate sees it, and so on and so forth. So how do humans and other apes predict if we're not mind reading? How is it that we're able to do that? This is a cartoon that went up on the left that I found after being obsessed with the news about this thing that happened south of the border last week. It was very exciting. And it's a picture that is from the New Republic. It's a picture of the Republican mind. Given the Republican National Convention's leaked memo about their fundraising techniques, they said, oh, we know that Republicans are paranoid, fearful, self-righteous, insecure, resentment-filled individuals who will give us money if we treat them that way. And so they're making predictions, the RNC was making predictions about individual Republicans based on not thinking about what they believe, not thinking about what they desire, but thinking about their emotions. They're fearful, so plan their fear. If you plan their fear, then you can get them to give money. About their personality traits, they're self-righteous, so play into self-righteousness, and then you can get them to give money. So things like appeal to emotional states, personality traits, making predictions based on things like stereotypes, like, oh, well, she'll do it because she's the woman. Or you want some directions, go ask the police officer because, you know, you can trust him to give you the direction. Or the cab driver because he knows the city really well. Or something much more simple, an embodied sort of primary intersubjectivity that we see in human-infant interactions. This is an image of the lower three, of an infant just a couple days old engaged in imitation of an adult making facial expressions. The adult sticks out the tongue and the infant sticks out the tongue as well. So there seem to be these other ways that we're able to make predictions of what we're going to do that don't rely on mind reading. I mean, one thing we do often is we predict from self as well. So social psychologists have told us this, certainly. So, you know, sushi's great, right? Who doesn't like sushi? Let's go for sushi after the talk. Everybody loves sushi, right? Because I like sushi, I assume everyone else does. And we predict from what people's past behavior. You know someone well, you know that, Anne's always going to get a latte after lunch, because that's what Anne does every day. It's just a lie, she doesn't really. But if you know that about her and you want to make her happy, you get her the latte after lunch. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's great. Right? So we make predictions often about what people do based on what we know they do every day. Very simple sort of thing. And trait attribution, certainly. So if you have a colleague who's very helpful and you need someone on your team, who are you going to ask? The helpful colleague or the selfish colleague who's never there to help out? You can ask the helpful colleague, right? Without knowing what they believe or what they think or why they're doing it, right? What their motivations are, we can already make generalizations about what people are going to do based on personality traits. So this is all coming from social psychology research on humans, but we also know that similar things are going on in other species. Right, so stereotypes and social roles of the adult male orangutan. You can predict what an adult male orangutan is going to do in virtue of being an adult male orangutan. Right, there are certain specific behaviors one engages in because you're that kind of individual. And so stereotypes, I should say, get a bad rap often, right? Because we always hear about negative stereotypes about sex and race and gender and things like that. Sexual orientation. But we are pattern recognizing creatures, and we form stereotypes, and stereotypes are extremely useful. So and a lot of stereotypes are quite accurate as well. Research in social psychology and research on stereotypes have found. So don't feel bad saying that don't be worried about me saying that there's a stereotype for an adult male orangutan. And it's not to say that there's there's something false about this, this description of traits that we associate with a certain kind of individual. Because in this case it's accurate, and in many cases with human stereotypes it's accurate as well. So we've got stereotypes, or something like stereotypes. We've also got the same sort of primary intersubjectivity we see with human children. Right, so this is an image from Tetsuro Matsuzawa's lab. I think this is Ayumu, chimpanzee Ai's son. And Matsuzawa was modeling sticking out his tongue. And Ayumu stuck out his tongue. Matsuzawa opened his mouth. Ayumu opened his mouth. Days old. Right, days old. So the same sorts of, you see the same sorts of behaviors. And also emotions. Right, so this is a slide from Lisa Parr's research. She's studying emotional facial expressions in chimpanzees. She's using, I think it's Disney software, animation software, to model the physiology of the musculature involved in emotional expressions, modeling her work after the work of Ekman on human facial expressions. So she's calling it chimpanzee FACS, the chimpanzee facial action coding system, after Ekman's work on human FACS, where he found that human facial expressions appear to be across cultural universals. And so she's developed these CGI chimpanzees, and she uses them to test emotional recognition in chimpanzees by presenting chimpanzees with these CGI images of emotional expressions. Okay, so humans use these other methods to predict behavior. Other apes use these other methods to predict behavior. So why would we need to mind read to begin with? What's the function of it? What would be the purpose of it? Well, we do other things with it, maybe. Have you guys ever read Us Weekly, Star Magazine? You have, I know you have. You might want to deny it, but somewhere in your life you wanted to know why Brad said goodbye. You want to know, why did he leave her? What does she know? Why did Katie leave Tom? What's going on? She knows something about, or why did she call off her wedding, or why she'll break his heart, right? So I just did this quick Google image search for why in Us Weekly, and there are gazillions of them. It's awesome. We care so much about why people did the things that they did. Why did Brittany shave her head? What was going on? What made her do it? And when we're asking these questions, we're really curious about what's going on. Often it's because someone's doing something weird, like shaving her when you're a famous fancy music star and you shake your head, that's kind of weird. She's kind of weird, you want to know why, what's going on. So when someone does something weird and we ask this question why, we want a story, we want an explanation. And we can explain behavior in many different ways. So if you don't like Britney Spears and you ask why she shave her head, you might say, she's just crazy. I mean, she's crazy, I don't care. This crazy Britney Spears, you know who she is? Oh, you do? Sorry. Yeah. So why'd she shave her head? She's crazy. And we see these sorts of dismissive explanations when we are condemning a behavior, when someone asks for an explanation for a behavior that's condemned. So, for example, after 9/11, some people really wanted to know, why is it that these terrorists flew these planes into these buildings? And a lot of the rhetoric you heard from, say, George Bush were, they hate our freedom, they're terrorists, they're insane, this sort of thing. But when people tried to explain their behavior in terms of their beliefs and their motives, their goals, right, their beliefs and their desires, they were often criticized. So, for example, Susan Sontag wrote an article trying to examine, root causes, trying to get at motivations and beliefs of the terrorists to figure them out, right? To figure out why they would do this. And then the New Republic had an article with the title, "What does Susan Sontag, Osama bin Laden, and Saddam Hussein have in common?" Right? So you're categorized as being a bad guy just by giving an explanation in terms of beliefs and desires for a behavior you want to condemn. So we can explain behavior in terms of personality traits or in dismissive terms like because she's crazy or a terrorist, but we can also explain behavior in terms of in mind reading.